Ladies and gentlemen, Christian Rutzer and I are very pleased to share our major findings in a nutshell of our research project, which is on transforming Switzerland into a green open economy, challenges for the labor market. Now, this project has been done in a research team, which is composed of 6 people. We have done it together with BSS Volkswirtschaftliche Beratung, Wolfram Kägi, and I from the Center for International Economics and Business, University of Basel. We have submitted the project. Wolfram Kägi is also here today. Christian Rutzer is presenting together with me, and on the lower part, Michael Lopsiger is also here, and they might enter the discussion. So we brought this team together because we have complementary skills. Volkswirtschaftliche Beratung, they did some work on scarcity in the labor market, and they also did some analysis on the on education policy. So they have that experience, and we have our core competencies in international economics and also in the latest method of scientific research, such as, for example, machine learning. So now, what are the questions we want to address? Well, we have the you can basically, we start with the assumption that because of increased awareness, increased incentives, regulations regarding the environment, the Swiss economy is about to be transformed into a green open economy. And now the question arises, is the Swiss labor market prepared for this? That's important, because if there are not enough people, enough skills that can support this transition, what is required in order to achieve this transition, well, the cost may be very high. So the question is the market prepared? What kind of skills will actually be necessary in order to make this transformation possible? The next question is, which industries might find it difficult to adjust due to labor market restrictions? This is important to achieve the goal. Just assume that some industries may have a hard time to find the people on the Swiss labor market. They may just shift production to other countries, and so that might be the emissions might be lower in Switzerland, but they might not be lower globally. So for that, we also looked at this part. And finally, the question is, what challenges may arise for, if at all, for education policy? Now, we published 4 scientific papers. We haven't published them, but they are in the referee process of international journals. We just published a book 2 days ago, a little booklet, which you can call a kind of an own synthesis report in German language, and that the link to the book will be available soon. So now let me ask Christian to move on, and then I will come back towards the end again.
Okay, so in order to answer such question that Rolf has proposed, we need a kind of a measure, and this measure we call the green potential of occupations. And what we mean about it, I will show you now. So just think about of 2 industries. We have one kind of polluting industry here. Maybe it's a kind of a traditional energy supplying industry. And we have kind of an environmental friendly industry, for example, clean tech. And in each of these, we have kind of different jobs, for example, engineers and also office jobs like secretaries and so on. And now in former times, what we've done, you just say, okay, how large is the green economy at the moment? And what you have done, you have to just count the persons employed within the environmental friendly industry. And then you say, okay, the overall part of the economy that is green is the size of that and that. That's fine from a perspective to just give you kind of the status quo, where a country, where a region is positioned at the moment. but it does not really inform you about what's the potential. So what happens when we move more towards a more sustainable economy? What's going on in the labor market? Are we really prepared for such a transformation? And in order to give there kind of an idea to measure such things, we have introduced a kind of a green potential measure. And just think here, we have kind of some engineers in the green industry, and they do perform some tasks that make kind of products more, they make more greener products or process more sustainable. And they need some skills for doing this. And then we ask ourselves, okay, if they do it, maybe other persons that at the moment actually do not perform green tasks but have kind of the same skill set could in principle also do kind of green tasks. And think of some engineers here in the polluting industry, for example, they just developing some steam engines, but in principle, such an engineer could also maybe move to a sustainable firm and produce some or develop some wind turbines. So they have kind of the same skill sets, but they do at the moment not perform kind of green tasks. On the other hand, think of persons in the environmental friendly industry that work just in the office. They have not skills that can be used for really perform kind of green tasks at the moment. Although in the traditional counting aspect, they would be just counted as kind of a green job because they are in the green economy. So in our idea is now to see how much person in general have kind of skills that can be in principle used in order to perform green tasks. Whether they at the moment perform it or not, that's not the question. It's just the question is just how large is the pool of persons that in principle could perform green tasks. And then the question arises, okay, how do we compare skill profiles? And for this, we use data from the RES, from the ONET database, and there it's about for 1,000 different occupations, you have data on whether an occupation performs green tasks. And you have also a lot of different information on general skills and occupation needs. And the skills are valued between 1, that means the skill is not really important for that occupation at all, and 5, that means that skill is very important for the occupation. And I have shown here you some examples. For example, complex problem solving. Here you see 2 examples of of engineering groups. These skills are very highly ranked, highly known, highly needed. And then you have for example, a musician, and there the skill is not so important. And now the idea is we want to train machine learning algorithms that really use these skills as an input in order to predict whether an occupation can, in principle, perform green tasks. And if we have then trained these machine algorithms, afterwards we have transferred the skills from US occupations to Europe occupations that are classified according to the ISCO nomenclature system. And these ISCO classifications are also used, for example, in Switzerland by the Federal Statistical Office to classify jobs. So then we have the skill levels also for kind of Swiss jobs, and then we can use the skill profiles in our previously trained machine learning algorithms in order to get a prediction whether a Swiss job can in principle perform kind of green tasks. And that's what we call the green potential measure. And the result is kind of a list here, as you see, where we have estimated green potential. It ranges from 0, that means the occupation has no green potential at all, to 1, that means that occupation has the highest green potential in our whole list. And what you see here in the upper part of the list, you have kind of technical, engineering and natural science occupations. But if we scroll more down, then you can find here more and more like service-oriented occupations, like occupations also from office clerks and so on, or also from nursing jobs. And we have also here in the third column, as you see, we have also estimated kind of the shortage, how short is the particular occupation in the Swiss labor market. And that's important to analyze how well prepared are different industries for transformation. Rolf Weder will come to this later on. And now, okay, with this list, we have now an indication where we can now calculate the green potential of countries. And what we have done then afterwards, we've said, okay, how much persons are employed in occupations that have a green potential that here is, for example, higher than 0.5. And that means kind of twice the median green potential from all occupations. And here in the map, what you see is the more greener the country, the higher is its share of persons employed in occupations with really high green potential. And you see here Switzerland has, when you set the threshold to half, a kind of a green potential of 10%. But there are also other countries with kind of rather high green potentials, for example, France and the Scandinavian countries, or also our neighbor country, Germany. And if we move, for example, the green potential cut off a little bit higher, the results in general remains kind of the same. So overall, from that descriptive analysis, you can conclude in relative terms, at least, compared to other European countries, Switzerland has kind of a high green potential. So the Swiss labor market offers kind of occupations with skills that could be in principle required when we would transform towards a more sustainable economy. But the question is, okay, do we really see that these skills are required, that these occupations with that skills are required when we move towards a more sustainable economy? In order to give this some empirical support, we have done some regression analysis where we have taken values from the past and see how much have the demand for different occupations changes when environmental policy become more stringent in different European countries. And what you see here, I will not go here in detail, but just from the second row, it's kind of an interaction term between the stringency of environment policy and the green potential of an occupation. And here you see the coefficients are highly positive significant. So that means in relative terms, if environmental policy become more stringent, then occupations with a high green potential became more demanded relative to occupations with a rather low green potential. And this gives us kind of some empirical support for our idea that green potential measure that we have found here out is really important in the labor market to really move towards a more sustainable economy. Or spoken differently, occupations with a high green potential have kind of skills that are really required when you transform to a more sustainable economy. And what this does now mean for industry level and so on, that will give you some insights, Wolf Weder.
Okay, let me continue now. Let's look at the industry level, right? And what we first looked at was the emission intensity of industries. So this is the emissions of CO2 equivalents relative to value added. And we also looked at the tradability of the goods the industries are producing. And here you have you see many industries. Take, for example, D23. I mean, this is the glass, ceramic, and cement industry. So it has a high emission intensity, but a low degree of tradability. So if this industry is forced to become more environmentally friendly, it's not as likely that this industry will be competed from abroad or that it will be dislocated. So they have more a bigger possibility, for example, to increase prices. On the other hand, take D21. That is the pharmaceutical industry. It has very low emissions, but a high degree of tradability. So again, we don't have a big problem. The problem potential is high for the industries on the upper right quadrant. D17, D20s, for example, the chemical industry. What you see is that these industries, they have a high degree of tradability, so they are in a tough international competition, and they have a high emission intensity. So if move towards a greener economy, they will have to do something. So let's go to the second figure now and ask the question, how about the labor market situations for these industries? And again, what you can see, in general, it is quite scarce regarding the labor market shortage. It is quite scarce regarding, or it's big, the shortage regarding the employment in green occupations. But the interesting thing is now what's happening to our three industries. And what you can see, if you remember, for example, the industry D17, which was the paper industry, which was on the right, in the former figure is now here on the left side. So it actually has a very small labor, a small share of people working in green occupations, and it also has, but it has a high labor market shortage, right? So the only industry, when you go back to the slide before, about emission intensity, Christian, the slide before, the emission intensity and the tradability of these three industries, it's only D20 that has a problem, because D20, the chemical industry, on the next slide, also has a high share of people working in green occupations, and at the same time it's facing a high labor market shortage. So our conclusion here is that the chemical industry might have a hard time to achieve a higher degree of sustainability without dislocating to other countries, whereas for the other industries we may not have a big problem. So now what's the conclusion here? And I just briefly say it. So the first thing, and that was really also in a way something we didn't expect as much as we did, especially the technical occupation have a high green potential. And this is maybe not very surprising, because somebody has to make sure the processes and the products are becoming more sustainable, and these are usually to a high degree people that have a technical background. What we also see is that the Swiss labor market has a relatively high green potential, but at the same time, these jobs are also relatively scarce. Industries are differently affected, but it seems that there are only a small number of industries that may have a big challenge to face. And so the last slide I want to show is regarding the general conclusion. So we believe that the Swiss labor market in general is prepared for this transition, but a tricky point might be the increased demand for jobs where people have technical skills. Regarding education policy, we come up with the usual implications that maybe we have to make sure that free rider behavior is reduced in order that firms have an interest to invest more in continuing education. And maybe we should actually promote certification of individual skills rather than a whole job. So skills across many jobs, especially green skills. That's basically it in a nutshell.